um, and they got chewed up, and then I come home and I'm just like, oh, I have that feel that deflated feeling. I think is that hopefully that's Josh. He he ran away because I told him he should do the opening prayer today.
Yeah, he's gone.
He's gone?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and bug his mom, Terry. Would you like to open up our Bible study with prayer?
I'm getting a complex here.
As
It's
I
because
am.
you're so good at it.
Yeah.
That's
Yes.
why.
Yeah. You're saying because she hates me. Father, thank you so much that I can be here. We ask that you be with Manny as he gives the message, that we would have open and receptive hearts. Lord, thank you so much for our many blessings. Thank you for our church family. Thank you for our pastor. We ask these things in your precious son, Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much for that. I'll be grabbing my phone for the first time during Bible study because I'm going to get to something first. But, just looking at the crowd, like that anxiety is just kicking in, meaning that, exactly. But hopefully we get more people coming in, and I'll reiterate a few points. But before we go ahead and start, well, actually, let me tell you guys what the lesson is. Session 11 reigns. That'll be Luke 6, 1 through 11. And it's going to be broken down into 3 parts. Verses 1 and 2, work on the Sabbath. 3 to 5, Lord of the Sabbath. And then 6 through 11, do good on the Sabbath. So in thinking about today's lesson, one of the questions that always kind of stumped me was in regards to the Sabbath is how do we recognize the Sabbath in today's society?
We don't.
Okay, we don't.
People think it's Sunday, and it's not. It's actually Friday sundown to Saturday sundown. So,
Yeah.
So they label it Sunday as the Sabbath, but it's not really.
So in today's society is different from back in the time of Jesus, where things we have more technology, we have more things available, but at the same time more distractions that are available to us. And one of the things that I've always had over the years as a concern is how do we observe the Sabbath in the sense that we can do the things of taking care of prior to Saturday, just going ahead and going to the store or doing everything. But at the same time, it's usually a day off from work. But what stumped me for a long time was how do we recognize the Sabbath ourselves without allowing others to do so? Because with the thought behind it was if I'm trying to enjoy my day of the Sabbath, the day of rest, to go do the things that I want to do, whether it's have fun with the family, going out to eat, but yet there are people who have to work those jobs in order for me to enjoy certain things, enjoy the commodity of going out to eat. How do I just think about that? I don't want to use the word justify too much in that sense, but how do I view that myself in the sense of if I'm trying to enjoy and have time with my family, how do I expect others to feel when they have to work to fulfill certain things that I want to accomplish? If I want to go to the store and buy I play video games with my son, okay, and I'll be like, I want to go out and buy a game. I can't during the week because I work and I have other responsibilities. How do I expect those people to observe the Sabbath when I'm physically going out there trying to make sure that I hold a copy of a video game, so to speak? So it was a question that kind of stumped me for many years, and we're going to get into a little bit more into this. So, without any further ado, Terry, I even did this for you. I looked this up. I'm trying to up my game as far as the PowerPoint here. So, I went ahead and placed this, put the verses on here. So let me go ahead and read it for you. And I am reading from the Christian Standard Bible version. On a Sabbath, he passed through the grain fields. His disciples were picking heads of grain, rubbing them with their hands and eating them. But some of the Pharisees said, "Why are you doing what is not lawful on the Sabbath?" So first impressions on these first two verses. They're at it again, yes. You know, first thing we go ahead and notice is we're talking about the Sabbath. That's the main point of this. But what is the Sabbath? And we kind of discussed it a little bit. Can anybody else kind of point out more information as far as the Sabbath so we can get a better understanding?
Just laws that, things that you weren't supposed to do.
Yes.
I mean, some of it was pretty, if you read it, it's pretty, well, in today's standard, it would be considered ridiculous, but, I mean, that's the way we look at it today.
Yeah.
I mean,
No working,
No working? Okay.
or anything that constitutes work.
Yes. So the origins does originally come from the creation of the world, where in Genesis, God does take the seventh day off for rest. It also comes to in Exodus, as the first time it's commanded to have the rest, to observe the Sabbath. Okay, and it is important because before this it was thought and recognized, but it wasn't until it was actually put into quote unquote command that it was actually more sought out to be a commandment, or to be a not a commandment, but something that God has wanting us to do so. So the thought is, why does God want us to rest? Okay.
spend time with him.
Yeah, that's part of it. So part of the Sabbath, one of the things that we can kind of straight away is worshiping, because the idea of having Saturday off and running into town to go do something, going to a birthday party, to have some kind of activity planned on a Saturday, for the ones that that we do work. But the thing is that it is also a time where we need to worship God, spend that time, that quality time with God. And in that, there's also other things that came about, and over time it started to become where it was a day also of feast, okay? Sacrifices in the Old Testament during that time were part of it, bread of the presence, but it was a blessing and a requirement. A blessing because you have that day off, have to go out of the norm of work and work and work all day, but it is required.
Is that their only day they worship Jesus?
No, I wouldn't say that was the only day of worshiping
Why
Jesus.
such an emphasis on
And as far as emphasis, that is where I was trying to learn more in the emphasis, what was coming behind it. I think if anybody has a thought in that. No, nobody?
Well, as we go through our work day, our mind's on our work. We don't have that time to actually spend, we can spend prayer during the week. There are moments.
And I can see that as part of it. Yes, I don't know myself as the true nature, as I have to do more research into it, in the sense of if the planning, God's intentions as far as the Sabbath, get more familiar with everything, especially during that time in which it was commanded during the time of Moses. That being said, the Sabbath is not the only day we can recognize or observe or be where we have time for God. I actually encourage people to read the Bible or to have prayer time. But the Sabbath is a day that we're supposed to become as family and worship together. Yes, we have Sundays where we come to church, as we are here today with our families, and we do observe like worship. But the Sabbath is also a day where we can come together as a family, and part of this is a thought of being together as a family, worshiping together. I don't know if you guys still do so with family or talk about the Bible or speak to your family members about the Bible, whether it's in person or over the phone or Zoom meeting, so to speak. But it is a requirement that God placed, and it is still a blessing to have. And that a lot of people look at the Sabbath and look at it, well, there's another mandate there, another thing that God wants us to do, and that's the wrong tone to have. On the opposite, we should be thanking God that He thought ahead of this. Okay, if we wouldn't have the quote unquote mandate to have the day of the Sabbath, would we rest? Or will we be in a society where we worked nonstop, where that was just the norm? So it entails, and these are just three things I kind of looked up, and part of it is like, large gatherings, because, you just gather in faith, public worship, okay, but also worship at home. And how do you rest in the Sabbath? This is a question I want you guys to see if you guys can give me an example of how you guys rest. I know, David, this is a tough one. So people do many things to rest on the Sabbath, and being that with the technology we have, people just binge watch movies or shows, and they stay home, they order pizza or something to that effect. Some people go out and they go out hiking, they do mountain climbing, something that they enjoy that isn't part of your daily routine. Sometimes you would go ahead and plan something ahead of time and be like, what, I'm going to go and do this activity, and you know what, it's going to be great. But then we come to the part of what is not considered like quote unquote resting or observing the Sabbath. And one of the things that come to mind, and I look at it as not being honoring God, is when you do things that aren't going to make Him happy, aren't going to please Him. Even if it wasn't the Sabbath, if you do things wrong or do things with the wrong intent, consequences may come about, or hopefully we realize what we're doing. But as an example that came to my mind is that, say you're on a Saturday and you're having a good time, and all of a sudden you come across someone and you just look at that person and you judge, just like Austin's message earlier. He was talking about judgment, and you're just judging that person just because that person just rubbed you the wrong way, or your initial impressions weren't all that great previously, so you have this bad intention. Or even if, say, another person is trying to, on a Saturday, is just relaxing and they're doing drugs, is that honoring God? That is not an activity that would bring joy to God. So the activities that we do while on the day of Sabbath, yes, we do look at worship. We do look at the time of rest, time to be with family. But at the same time, well, what are we doing? Is this honoring God? Where are we? Where are our thoughts lie? What's our intent in our actions? So going back to the scripture itself, why do the Pharisees have a problem with Jesus?
They don't believe it. A lot of them are thinking that he's not the Messiah. He's fighting with them because of that. I thought. Yeah.
Chris? You?
Because they codified the Sabbath laws, and that actually a perversion of the law, and it's called legalism.
See?
They have their rituals and their legalism, they put that above what God's intention of the Sabbath was.
Yeah, so the Pharisees have part of the problem is the judgment, where they've been following Jesus for quite a bit of time, looking for any reason to accuse him of something, to look at his actions to see what is he doing. In this reading, we're looking at the Sabbath. What is he doing during the time of the Sabbath? Is he recognizing if Jesus healing people? What is Jesus doing? So Jesus is being judged in these two verses. He's being judged partially on the actions of his disciples. So they're walking through a field and they're just eating the grains. And even though it doesn't state that Jesus was partaking in this, as we read along, we're going to look at the fact that the Pharisees are looking at Jesus as, you're allowing this to happen. As in, these people are under your control. These are your people, your disciples. You're in charge and equally responsible. So, Sabbath being that it's basically a holy ritual, but the loss of motivation is where we kind of have issues with. Where, just like when we come to church, if someone just comes to church just for the meaning of just sitting, warming up a seat and just being here and saying, I was here, that's the loss of motivation. If we looked in the book of Isaiah where the rituals that were being conducted had no meaning anymore, to the point that God was displeased. So that's part of the issue that the Pharisees kind of, I look at the Pharisees and I see where they've kind of went away, and they're more important on putting more importance on what's the law, what's right, what's wrong, and not looking at the true nature of the acts itself. So at this point, we're going to go to the second portion, which is verses 3 to 5, and I'll go ahead and read it. Jesus answered them, haven't you read what David and those who were with him did when he was hungry? How he entered the house of God and took and ate the bread of the presence, which is not lawful for any but the priest to eat. He even gave some to those who were with him. Then he told them, the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath. So any thoughts into that reading?
Well, he used the phrase the Son of Man in the previous chapter when he healed the paralyzed man.
Yes.
And they didn't like, the Pharisees didn't like it then,
Yes.
and they're not going to like it now.
And that is something that I am going to get to. It does point of a sign of authority in God. one of the first things that I think about when I read those three verses is, the referencing back to David. It is important. And why bring up David is because the Pharisees viewed David as a great man of God. Okay, he was a king. Okay, but he had flaws himself, unlike Jesus. But they view Jesus' acts as blasphemy. They view him as not being a prophet, not being a person, the son of man. They just see him as a person who's just lying his way through everything. Okay. And bringing David up is very important because David did the same thing as far as doing as on the day of the Sabbath. And he brings this up not to be like, look at me, I'm just like David, but rather like, you're upset at me, but you give so much credit to David and you view him as a great person of God, which he was, but they don't judge him the same.
He didn't say he was the son of man either.
Oh, no.
David was David.
Yes. David was David, yes. Just like we have our own David, we love him for the David he is. But David was flawed and put basically in, I don't want to say a pedestal, but he's put in a great light. Okay. And then we have Jesus, who has the authority, who has not done anything to bring any judgment from God, okay? Yet he's being judged more. He's being more scrutinized for going about his works, and would the Pharisees take this well? I misspelled that. Take it. How would the Pharisees just take this whole experience up to this point?
Well, they're looking for him to mess up.
A rebuke, as in they're looking to rebuke him? Is it?
Jesus is rebuking the Pharisees.
Oh, yeah. Yes. So how would the Pharisees feel in this situation, where they look at Jesus, how they are looking at him, but there's a little bit more information as to that I was thinking about this morning when it comes to the Pharisees, because I was thinking about the Pharisees, like, why would they feel this way? We know why, but how? To what extent? What created this? But I am going to get into that, but I just want to kind of like drop that little dot into your minds. But the Lord of the Sabbath, and also the phrase of the Son of Man, which gives him authority. Okay. And no one prior to this has ever claimed themselves to be the Son of Man. They dare not. But the Lord of the Sabbath, when he comes up and says, I'm the Lord of the Sabbath, this also kind of angers the Pharisees in a sense as he's still lying. And that's what they're holding on to. The Pharisees are holding on to the fact at this point that Jesus is just talking lies, speaking to the crowd, trying to get the momentum of the crowd. Because remember, during this time, crowds had power in the sense of, governments or people of the law couldn't outright just go and murder someone in openly. In certain situations, if there was a big crowd, they would wait. And I'm not just talking about Jesus, I'm talking about in overall and during this time and even afterwards, even in the times of Rome. The fact that crowds had some kind of power to them. I'm not saying that they were, great power, but it would prevent certain people of authority from harming somebody just because they didn't want that crowd to become a mob. So that is important to think about this, and I believe. Any thoughts into that portion? So I'm going to get to the third part, which is a little more extensive. So I'll go ahead and read it. Verses 6 through 11. On another Sabbath, he entered the synagogue and was teaching. A man was there whose right hand was shriveled. The scribes and the Pharisees were watching him closely to see if he would heal on the Sabbath, so that they could find a charge against him. But he knew their thoughts and told the man with the shriveled hand, "Get up and stand here." So he got up and stood there. Then Jesus said to them, "I ask you, is it lawful to do good on the Sabbath or to do evil, to save life or to destroy it?" After looking around at them all, he told him, "Stretch out your hand." He did, and his hand was restored. They, however, were filled with rage and started discussing with one another what they might do to Jesus. So, first impressions or thoughts into this last section?
They're out to get him. I mean, it's pretty obvious.
Okay. So the first thing that comes to my mind when I read this passage was another Sabbath. So why is this important? Because this means that this isn't happening on the same day. Okay, this is not happening in consecutive days, like from Saturday to Sunday, but it is in telling that there's at least another Sabbath, meaning that the Pharisees have been following Jesus throughout this time. It wasn't a quick, let me go look at what Jesus is doing and make my conclusions there. But they're purposely going and following Jesus. What do you think that the motivation would be for the Pharisees? Hate? Okay. What?
Trying to catch him in something. I mean, it's like, you're watching somebody and, you're hoping that he slips up so you can prosecute him. I mean, in this case, persecute or prosecute, I don't know. But it seems that they're just waiting for him to slip up.
So when I look at this portion, I can't do anything but just to kind of think about this a little bit more, as to they've been following him around more than one day. This is the second Sabbath, okay, that they've been following him around. I'm not sure if they've been following him throughout the week, but definitely during the Sabbath. But where does this stem from? Is where my thought came, and I was thinking about it, and I was trying to understand that more. And the only thing I can think about is the people themselves. Could they have been ordered to do so? Yes. But they are Pharisees. They are well versed in the laws during this time. So where does this stem? Where does it come from? Is where I was stuck for quite a bit of time, and all I can kind of think about is, if they're following Jesus, they had the intent to find him guilty or accuse him of something. Where does that stem from? They made it a point to come from different parts of the region to come together to go see Jesus to judge him. So before they even leave to go seek Jesus out, they must have heard stories, okay? and might have already made a a judgment or a thought of how they were going to feel. It's unfortunate because we still see this today. So when there's something that goes on in our communities or go on in our country, let alone the world, one of the things a year ago when they had the gathering in Minden, Gardnerville for the Trump visit, and I don't want to get political or anything like that, but it's a good example of what I'm talking about. The reason for it is because there was two opposite sides to this, okay? And I heard from two different sides where one was, I'm gonna go support the president, and I don't care what happens. I'm gonna defend our Constitution, our Second Amendment right, and yada yada yada. Okay. And then the other side that I also heard was people that were going to it is like, this country is wrong. The basis of this country is just shattered, and we need to make change. And also hearing they're gonna protect themselves in the sense of what they believe in. What I thank God for is that nothing really happened except for some verbal altercations. But the preconceived notion of what they went into it with. You have two sides equally passionate about what their stance is, going to the Gardnerville, Minden area, knowing that, if something happens, they're going to take care of the problem, alluding to a physical situation. So when I look at the Pharisees here, I kind of have the same sense, so to speak, where they went out because they came from different parts of the region, okay? And they gathered to go see Jesus. They didn't sit back and waited for Jesus to see if he came to their part of the town, or they saw him out. And we can kind of learn where their thoughts are, where they're going. They're looking to charge him, and worse. And they continue to observe him, to observe Jesus, trying to find a charge for him. So, I was telling Austin a story, okay, and this was on Thursday, I believe, before you got there, Jacob. I lived in Northlake, Illinois, and I will drive an hour and 15 minutes to work and back, okay, and I would take this major highway that was called Manheim, which led you to O'Hare Airport. So I would turn many miles before that. I would turn left at a gas station. I would pass an alley, make a right turn, drive 2 blocks. Well, it was 1 block, but it seemed like 2 blocks. Get towards the end, make a left-hand turn into the driveway, and I lived in the second floor of not an apartment, but a house, because it's typical in the Midwest to, treat it as apartments, the first floor, the basement, and the second in attics, if you have an attic, as apartments, so to speak. And I was telling Austin that one of the things I didn't like was when at night, when it was more wintertime, I'll be driving and a cop just gets behind me, and I can see that glow in their face, And I'm like, oh, they're running my tags. I never had a ticket, never got pulled over, never got into trouble. But they will still kind of tell me, and I'll make that left turn by the gas station. And if they turn, I knew they're looking to continue to follow me. So I knew what they would always do was I would go put my blinker to turn right, and they'll try to cut me off by going through the alleyway. Okay, and I would make a right-hand turn, and this is where I did wrong, was I would speed down the street and make a left-hand turn into that private driveway, get out the car before the cop came around. Okay, I must say I did wrong in that sense for speeding in there, but my sense was like relief because I'm no longer in the car, it's in private driveway, they can't, hassle me for it. Okay. So it's unfortunate because I got to that mind frame. Was I right every single time? No. I never spoke to them or anything, but I started to have my own thoughts into the reasoning for it. Okay, but when you live in Chicago for many years, you tend to hear stories, and some are way out there, and I wouldn't believe a lot of them, but there's some times where they come out to be true, unfortunately. So there are people that come out looking to look for a flaw in us, and as Christians, it's not that we'll fall, but we'll understand that people will hold us to a higher level just because we're Christian and they're not. People will conceive us to be, well, you are supposed to be good and you just got upset over something. Well, we're not perfect. It doesn't give us the ability to get mad or say something wrong. Okay, we're still human. But that preconceived thought in people's minds that because we're Christian, we go to church, we must act a certain way, and that's the only way we can act. We should be following all of God's standards and wants, but we do falter. And the only thing I'm bringing up is that thought of people in their minds. So why was Jesus healing on the Sabbath? Because he knows, excuse me? Yeah. Because he knows why they're there, why the Pharisees are there and the scribes are there. He knows this. This is why he addresses the gentleman the way he did, knowing that they were going to look at him, knowing that they were going to judge him for doing work on the Sabbath. And he does look at them, and he presents this question that goes unanswered. Do you do work that is good or evil, or that saves a life or destroys it on the Sabbath? And part of this is where I was looking at the Sabbath in the sense of work. Okay, and though they were looking at him like with hawkeye eyes, trying to get him on anything, there is still a rebuke to the Pharisees. Okay? And he definitely tells them about his work as far as being good versus evil. But there's also other instances where if there was a life-threatening injury to a person, would a doctor walk away on the Sabbath? Or would a doctor take the time to try to heal, to prevent this person, man or woman, to be healed, to prevent them from dying? Yes. And if someone's injured, and I was looking at a commentary that was describing a situation where in these times if a livestock like sheep, we'll use like a sheep, if it fell down a well, would the shepherd just leave it alone, knowing that it's going to die in this instant, if it's on the Sabbath? So there's complex situations and questions, and this is why I was dumbfounded for so long about how do we observe the Sabbath if we don't allow others to do so. But it comes down a lot of the times where, is this pleasing to God? Is this God's work? Is this helping others, which is part of what God wants us to do? And in part of this, and this is why I brought my phone, and I haven't done this in a while, but I'm going to read John 7, verses 21 through 24. I performed one work, and you are all amazed, Jesus answered. This is why Moses has given you circumcision, not that it comes from Moses, but from the fathers. And you circumcise a man on the Sabbath. If a man receives a circumcision on the Sabbath so that the law of Moses won't be broken, are you angry at me because I made a man entirely well on the Sabbath? Stop judging according to outward appearances, rather judging according to righteous judgment. Yeah, Jacob, I just saw your eyes. So, any thoughts into the Sabbath after I read that? David, you want me to read it again for you?
Well, I think I understand. Mosaic dispensation is that, those were the laws back then.
Yes.
Now, I don't know. There's a lot of law in the definition of work that the Pharisees had. And if you read some of that, you would say that's not right, but that's what it was.
And times do change where things that in the Old Testament aren't as observed as in the New Testament or in today's, especially in today's society. You know, we have many things where we get conflicted with how things were back then to what it is now, and how can we adjust or look at it in our times, in our modern times, to still fulfill the things that are asked of us. You know, we continuously see the changing of our times in society. Partially that's due to the technology or things like social media. It also comes down to what's being placed even in the shows or TV that we're watching, even the news outlets. Okay, and I'm not going to get to which is which as far as news, because that becomes political itself. But when we see programming in today's modern time where it's okay, they view things that it's okay for you to do drugs, or it's okay for you to drink, go out for a night drinking where you can't remember, what transpired, the night before. And I've said it many times, where do we come into our youth, in teaching our youth, when society now views and portrays TV shows and movies where it's almost for sure in that new TV shows, they're going to have some kind of thought of sin being okay. Whether it's drinking, whether homosexuality, whether it's drugs, whether it is going against your parents in a sense, in a dishonorable way. Okay, and it is sad to see in today's society, but it's something that we kind of have to come not accustomed, but understanding of what's going on, so we can kind of rebuke that when we're trying to teach our youth, even trying to teach adults as well. We have people that come to church and they're adults and they accept Jesus Christ, and They're still trying to learn, understand. Just because they're adults doesn't mean that they don't need a helping hand to understand certain things. I definitely still trying to learn more. Oh, I went back. So, why the rage of the Pharisees? And I kind of went down quite a bit. But part of this has to do with somewhat of pride, so to speak. Although it was preconceived notions, thoughts, because the Pharisees look at themselves as the keepers of the law. Okay? So when someone goes against them, just like if we would be today, if we have a sheriff's officer and he's being contradicted or rebuked, so to speak, how would they feel? I hate to continuously bring up examples, but you know, I love all the officers here in Nevada that I've come across. Okay, I know there's some bad apples. Okay, but at the in these situations when someone is confronted, and I made sure that when I wrote this, Pharisees felt humiliated, and that is kind of true. More upset than humiliated, but I made sure I wrote the word confronted instead of attacked, because Jesus rebukes them just before he heals this man's hand, okay, his arm. That this was more of a confrontation thing, not to do it in spite to teach them a lesson, but to show them that he was doing good. He had authority. That there's reasoning outside of their mental capacity at this time that he was partaking in. But the plot begins because in the reading, if the very last line, and I'm going to get back to that, it says, and the scribes, Pharisees, and the Pharisees were watching him closely to see if. Oh, that's the wrong one. Yeah. Oh, I apologize for the wait here. They, however, were filled with rage and started discussing with one another what they might do to Jesus. So when I put the plot begins, I put that in question marks because they're talking about what they're going to do to Jesus. Well, are they going to harm him? Are they going to, quote unquote, teach him a lesson? Are they going to think about murdering him or having someone else kill him? Okay, but the reason why I put question marks is at the end of the day here, if they already had thoughts in how they felt about Jesus, the plot had already began prior to this. And like we've said before, is that sin comes from the heart, and then it stems upwards to the mind to think about, well, how you can, if you're thinking about sin, of dwelling in sin, how are you going to do it? Okay, and then the third part of it is action.
Also what I was going to say. They not only did not believe that he was the Son of God, but they believed that they were the authority.
Yeah.
And that he was going over that.
And part of that issue is that they're so used to having Pharisees where they've, they have authority for generations and generations, not thinking about that. At one point, Jesus is going to come. The Messiah is going to come. And part of that is that they're not ready for it. So their natural instincts would be to question it. If Jesus came today, we will still have people who will question Jesus' second coming. they will be like, no, that's not him. No, that's just a fake prophet, a false prophet. So in this situation, what do I take from this? And I ask you guys, definitely, what do you guys take in the way the Pharisees conduct themselves here?
It's not surprising.
It's not surprising. They are definitely accustomed to the ways that they go about things. They're not ready for Jesus. But as keepers of the law and people who are elevated to a certain degree higher than the common folk, common people, is that they're just like any position, they're supposed to be held at a higher standard. And people do fail in that. Whether it's greed, whether it's power that they seek, they lose sight of things. We just have to be aware of this. But kind of wrap it up because, the first section was pretty short. But here are two key points here. Jesus is Lord of all of his creation, including the Sabbath, and Jesus prioritizes people's needs over keeping rituals. And when writing this, I also was thinking about the book of Isaiah that we went into, we are there to observe the Sabbath. We're there to do what is asked of us. Could there be exceptions in the sense that the Lord's work will allow us to help another person? Yes. Okay, but it does not give us the authority to just write off God's commands or just because we think something is more important. And that is the key information where we have to understand is what do we think about what is more important? What's our priorities in life, in today's society? Watching a football game won't be no longer a priority for me. It once was. Okay, many years back it was, but we have to kind of self-reflect in this situation, in these key points there. So, and unless you guys have any questions, comments, or concerns, I'll go ahead and end with a prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for allowing us to get together as a group. Thank you so much for allowing us to hear your message. I hope that I myself did your work, not my own, but your work, that your words and your message, that it came through me as a vessel to your people. I hope that each and every one of us thinks about some of these questions so that we can go about not just our day or week or months, but go about life thinking about what our priorities are and how can we improve. That we don't get blinded by today's society with all the distractions that we have available to us. So bless us, keep us in your thoughts, in your eye, in your vision, and continues to bless us so that we can spread your message and help others in the time that is in need for them. In your glorious name I pray this. Amen.